Let me remind you what the Bible's theme is. It's God revealing himself to man for the sake of salvation. Hi everyone, I'm Tammy Becker. I'm the founder of YOU Ministries, and you are finding yourself on the third episode where we are recapping Genesis. So let's jump right in. So before we get started, I want to remind you that Genesis is put into two parts, 1 through 11 and then 12 through 50, which is mostly about Abraham and his family. The first 11 chapters, we see that there's so many firsts. First and foremost, it's the beginning. God starts out the very first, Genesis 1:1. God created. So that means this is where so much controversy comes in. God was already there. How did God create it? You know, we get themes from evolution, sparks. People think that two things hit together and there was evolution. Well, we know anytime two things collide, it causes chaos and things like that. And that's not what happened. God was there. God is a good God. God is full of love. And so he wanted a reflection of himself, so he created man. And we see that it's Adam and Eve are the first human beings that God created in the image of himself. Now, when we think about that he created the image of himself, it doesn't mean in our physical sense. It means that God created in our being, our soul, our thoughts, our mannerisms. He created us like him because he wanted to show that he's the creator of the universe. He wanted people to fellowship with, so he created the earth and he created the humans. Now, when he created in the 6 days, we see that it says God created the heavens and the earth, and then on the seventh day he rested. So these 7 days doesn't necessarily represent what are 7 days as humans. As a matter of fact, in 2 Peter 3:8, it tells us, with the Lord, a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is like a day to us. So right there it tells us it doesn't mean that he created in 6 24-hour periods, because one day could be 1,000 years to the Lord, according to 2 Peter. So on the seventh day he was just done. So he rested and he thought all was good. And that's where we come into the key term of fall of man. In chapter 3, we see that Eve ate of the tree of good and evil. And they talk about a serpent. Again, everyone relates the serpent to a snake, but if you go into Revelations, you'll actually see the serpent talks about like big, fierce animal, like dragon type animal, versus just a little snake that we think in our minds. So go to Revelations and read more about that. So we see the first is the sin. So that's another first. First is God created. The second, we see the first thing in the world, and that's sin and the fall of man. Then the second first we see is Cain and Abel. We see the first murder. Cain murdered his brother Abel just out of jealousy. And how many times in the real world do we see people do stupid things over jealousy? It's ridiculous. And he murdered his own brother just out of jealousy. There's no need to be jealous, because our life here on earth is just that. These material things are going to go away, and whatever you're jealous of, we don't need to be, because our goal and our focus in our life should be on that eternal path to Christ in heaven. And so these things of the world will not matter. What matters is what we're doing to prepare to go to heaven. And if you're not preparing to go to heaven and you're not in the will of God, then I suggest that you really take a deeper look at that. And then the next thing that we see is the Bible talks about Enoch. Now, a lot of people they kind of just brush over Enoch. As a matter of fact, 3 of his books were not even put into the Bible. But Enoch was a very, very righteous man. And God loved Enoch so much. That's why I just love reading about Enoch. God loved him so much, he didn't even have to experience death. Enoch went straight up to heaven. He didn't even have to die. God loved him so much, and he was such a righteous person that God just took him straight up to heaven. Wow, wouldn't that be great to not have to die and just go up and be so beloved that we could just go straight up to heaven? So if you want to read about Enoch, do some searches on Enoch. This is one that I study Enoch with. It's the Complete Books of Enoch by Dr. A. Nealon, and it's very good. There's a lot of commentary in here. So, okay, then the next one is Noah, and we see that with Noah, what happened is another first is, first of all, the world has just become so corrupt that God makes a covenant, or this is another first, the first covenant in the Bible. He makes a covenant with Noah that once he brings the flood and washes away all of the evil that's in the world, that he would never flood the earth again. And he made that covenant with Noah. So that was another first in Genesis that we saw. And then we get to the Tower of Babel. So everybody is, now they've learned brick and mortar, right? And they're building bricks. So then they get this crazy idea. Well, we're going to build this temple, this tower, this building, and we're going to build it so far high that we can get up to God and we can be like God. And God saw this, and he saw the wickedness once again. So God scattered the people, and how he did that was he changed their languages. He made them all have different languages where they couldn't communicate anymore, and they couldn't build that tower, showing that once again, God is in control of this universe. God is in control of this earth. God is in control of us. We think that we can change the things on the earth, but we can't. It's all in God's hands. I mean, he does give us the skill to do things and the skill to listen to him and make things better in the world. But the ultimate thing is God already knows what's going to happen in this world. He's longing for that relationship with us and for us to seek him and do the will of God in what he has intended for us. So now we're into the second part of Genesis that I told you. It's broken into two parts. It's the 12 through 50, and this is all about God's beloved first prophet, another first, Abraham. And you know, in the New Testament, Abraham is mentioned 77 times. 77 times God, through his thoughts, told man to put all these mentions of Abraham. That's how much God loved Abraham. And now we see that the second covenant of God brings in circumcision. And this is when it shows that Israelites and all the people of God were going to be circumcised to show that they were God's people. And every infant on day 8 was going to be circumcised from there on out. And then from there, this leads us into Sodom and Gomorrah. And Sodom and Gomorrah, just like it says, Sodom, we know it's sodomy, was all about men were going to people's houses and telling them to send out the boys, send out the sons, so that they could have sex with them. So this is the term, this is why Sodom and Gomorrah was so bad, just another bad place to be. And God was not happy with that. And then we get into Abraham and Sarah, who were very old, but God, they were very impatient, because then they decided that since they didn't have any children, they were so old, that Sarah said that you should have a child with Hagar, the maidservant. And so they were impatient, but God made it through with his promise. And in their old age, he gave them a son. We see once again the constant conflict with good and evil. And we notice that Shem, all his descendants ended up being the Israelites, the good people, and that Ham ended up being the Canaanites and all the bad people. So we see the division there. And then we get Joseph in his coat of many colors from his father, his brothers trying to kill him. And then they turn him over and he gets sent to prison. But in the end, he gets them all together. They all become a family, and he made what should have been a bad situation to the brothers, but God made it into a good situation once again. So on our final thoughts, I wanted to tell you about some things that are very interesting that show that Genesis is very, very true. So it's discoveries from the past. First, there was creation. There was tablets that were found about hundreds of years ago in the ruins of the Babylonian. Now remember, the Babylonian people they were bad. Babylon's a bad place. But they found the tablets there talking about that on these tablets that the creation of the world was by something out of this world, in other words. So right there, that is proof that Genesis is true. And another true fact in the flood, another Babylonian story they found on the tablets, it was discovered about the ark and the flood. They didn't worship our God once again, but they talked about this power that came beyond human power. And then there's the cities in Genesis. And then thousands of years ago, tablets were found in the Syrian city of Elba that contain the names of the Canaanite cities that are mentioned in the book of Genesis. So another thing that shows that Genesis is true. And then the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. This is really fascinating to me because scientists today discovered that Sodom and Gomorrah has a chemical, let's see what it was called. It was destroyed by sulfur. So that smoke from the sulfur is kind of like what a furnace emits today. And so when they studied the ground where Sodom and Gomorrah was, it says that they report that the chemicals in the ground mixed together and exploded. Once again, proving not by the Bible, but by physical science, right in the exact place that Sodom and Gomorrah was burned to the ground. Another true fact that tells us that Genesis is absolutely written by the thoughts of God given to men, and that it absolutely is true. So I hope that you have enjoyed this quick go through of Genesis. I know it was a lot of information, but if you read your book, hopefully I've hit on the key terms of these very wonderful creating book that God gave us for the very beginning of time. And if you haven't joined us yet, get on over to our Facebook group, Girl Read Your Bible, and get in our study right away. We're going to be back here every Wednesday and talking to you and what the next chapter, and that's going to be Exodus. So by next Wednesday, have your whole book of Exodus read, and we'll go over all the key points right here on the next episode. And I hope to see you back next Wednesday. I'm Tammy Becker, and I'll see you next time. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit my bell, and check us out on our website at www.youministries.com. Bye. So then we see a covenant come about the circumcision. Then we see the second covenant happen, and that's when God wanted circumcision.